I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, the former founder of Electric and now the co-founder of Scaleless. And today I'm talking with Julian Timings, who's the co-founder and CEO at Outron AI, e-commerce ad automation made easy with AI. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Brandon. Excited to be here.
Before we dive into all things advertising, can you give everybody a quick background on yourself and how you came to founding this business?
Sure. I'm originally from the UK. I have a fairly technical background. I did a PhD at Cambridge University in autonomous vehicles, a slightly different area than what we're discussing today. But I think that kind of like is a bit of the fundamental grounding, I guess, around some of the approaches that we take. After that, I went in. I actually worked in F1 for a couple of years. Big motorsport fan, and then I realized that entrepreneurship, I think, was for me. So that was when I kind of founded my first business. And again, in a bit of a different space. It was in the kind of cloud kitchen space. And then after that, a couple of years, that business got acquired. And then I went on to start actually an Amazon business. And I guess this was the first time that I touched the world of Amazon, and I was selling products myself on Amazon and feeling the pain, I guess, around advertising, and also realizing the significance of how important it is to run ads and how much Amazon themselves index that in terms of your performance. So feeling that pain on Amazon regarding the ads, I kind of lent on my technical background and actually built a solution to run Amazon ads for my business. And it wasn't really intended to necessarily be a solution for everyone, but I shared it with Sean, who's now my co-founder at Outron, and he was running separately. He was running had an Amazon business that he was running in the US, and I shared the software with him, and it started to work really well for his business too. And then we started to realize that there's a bit more of a broader pain point here that other sellers could benefit from this. So that's when we kind of turned the software into an actual SaaS product, which we could approach a little bit differently, I would say. Like, we don't come at it from a traditional agency point of view. We try to provide like a self-service solution but Outron is the thing doing all the heavy lifting. And we've been running it for a couple of years now, going really well. Obviously, it's underpinned by pretty complicated optimization, and more recently, the move forward in AI. We've obviously been incorporating those tactics and skills into what Outron does. And that brings us to today.
What business was your Amazon business?
So this was a product selling predominantly eco-friendly homeware. A bit of a random choice, but you find the niche and saw the opportunity. And that business is still active today, but also is used somewhat as a testing ground for Outron when we try out all the new stuff and so forth. So I think it was an interesting path, but now we're super focused on the Amazon ads tool and product for other sellers and brands.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard time and time again of companies that are started out of an existing company because you're addressing some sort of pain point or problem that you have with the current business, and I think that's a model that works really well. I
think fundamentally, right, you got to address the pain point of the customer, right, and not necessarily just come up with an idea of, oh, you think this would work. It's about like, what are the customer's needs? Like, how can you address them? And in our case, right, it's the pain points are around, typically, solopreneurs or small SMEs, they don't necessarily have the in-house expertise to run ads, right? And this is where Ortron can handle that. They have limited time, and again, Ortron's like super automated. That was like one of the key things. It's about setting it high level goals, and it goes off and does everything. It runs like creates all the campaigns, manages all the campaigns, does all the optimization. So it gives you back as a um, as a founder or entrepreneur, a lot of time, which is obviously important, and you can put that into other areas of your business. And then again, like, and a little bit on the pricing side, what we do a little bit different is we're highly variable, I guess, which is different to typical agencies where there's quite a high upfront cost. And what we do is we start on, a really modest monthly fee. And as you scale up, like then our fees kind of go up with your success, right? So this is a little bit different. We try to align ourselves as much as possible with success, and not necessarily ad spend, which is typically how uh, you know
Yeah.
others in this space like charge brands and sellers.
What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in the Amazon ecosystem since starting the company to today?
Yeah, well, I would say for sure there's a very strong move towards automation and bots, right? I think like at the end of the day, a little quite similar to some extent to Google AdWords and the where that went. It did move in a direction, and we're seeing Amazon move in a similar direction, where algorithms are the ones that are in the auctions a lot of the time, right? And these are obviously, as an Amazon seller, you can manually run your ads, but increasingly we're seeing automation, right? And that's Ortron and that's others as well that are in this space. And I always like to give the analogy towards like stock trading, right? I think there was a point in time where the algos kind of took over, right, and saw all those opportunities and could like react instantly to the opportunity in the market. And Amazon Ads is kind of a little bit similar, where like obviously the bots kind of can be instant. They have data flow with the almost real time feedback of what's happening and how to adjust accordingly. So that's one of the major trends that we're seeing, right? And I think generally speaking, in the next couple of years, I think it's going to be 80 to 90% of the auctions are going to be you competing against other software solutions, I would say. So that's, I would say, one of the key things. And then Amazon themselves just developing the ads platform, right? It started off relatively rudimentary, and they're plowing now a lot of resource into building the ad platform up, making um, different formats such as video, different placements, different other kind of like solutions to help brands manage their data. So a general maturity, I would say, of the advertising platform is probably pretty significant. And then, of course, just on the seller side, like what we see is, of course, an increasing competition. So, like month on month, CPCs, cost per clicks, just on one trajectory, and that's going up, right? So you're
Mm.
constantly just fighting, and that's as more people, Amazon's obviously trying to get more and more sellers on board, and they all want to advertise, and that drives up cost per clicks. So you kind of can't stand still with the way you're operating your ads as well, because it's getting increasingly competitive, right?
Are there certain types of brands that you're seeing work well now versus others?
I think like I mean, one of the kind of like key things for being successful is, so I would say on the ad side, like there's two really important components, right? There's the actual advertising, which is what Ortron does, but that's very much in partnership with like the listing, if you like, the actual product you're selling, right? So, because the actual product itself is what determines like ultimately like the conversion rate of that, for that sale, right? The advertiser can put the right buyer on the page, but you got to have like competitive product, in terms of price, reviews, ratings, all the imagery used to be top notch. So what we see in terms of people that have the best, most success in general are those that still have a good product, right? I think that you can't just rely on ads and expect like um, an average product to become a bestseller. So I would say like that's a key factor for success. And another one is more, operationally, I guess, like just stay in stock. Those who can always be in stock get rewarded by the Amazon algorithm for, always having, a continuously high sales velocity and not stocking out. So that's a really, really important factor, which is always a struggle, I think, right? Because, everyone, Amazon is not a great business for cash flow, right? You lay out a lot of money to get inventory, and then, it takes you, I don't know, a couple of months to gain that money back, etc. So, that's always a challenge. So managing cash, those who can manage cash flow better and therefore like remain in stock and have high quality products generally are the ones that are more successful.
Got it. Yeah, it seems like there's certain categories on Amazon that are just so unbelievably saturated, and commoditized, and not a great spot for potentially a newcomer to play. But are there still some that are out there where you would get excited about a new business coming to market within that particular category?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think you've uh, there's of course there's always ones that ride like the trends of the time, right? Still being able to kind of get in early on a trend for a product or type of product or category is going to be meaningful, at least in the short term. But I would can't think of one off the top of my head in terms of the great opportunity out there right now. But there's definitely opportunities and products and categories that are less saturated and are still wide open in many ways, I would say. But I think it goes back to the kind of it's, how you source the product is super important, and who you're competing against when you source it. And obviously, what we see is a general shift towards a lot more like manufacturers, but based in China and Asia, selling direct to consumers, right? So like that's and certain categories and products that's easier for them to do versus not, right? And so most of our business is in the US and North America, but we also have a sizable amount in Europe. And Europe's an interesting opportunity for Amazon because mainly through regulation, it's a little bit more challenging, right? And there's some good opportunities there. There's obviously there's different languages you have to consider.
Hmm.
There's all these new regulations around which many European Amazon sellers are struggling with at the moment, called GPSR, which is basically around um, highlighting, like, providing instruction manuals and those sort of things with products. So, like, I think, like, if you can get around, that's a significant barrier for others. And actually, if you manage to get around that or have those things in place on your business, then I guess you can have good opportunities in those marketplaces too. So always worth thinking outside of North America too, right? Europe is still a significant opportunity as well.
Got it. Yeah, I think it is interesting to see sort of the mix between sellers that are on Shopify versus Amazon versus both, depending on like the geographical region that they're in. As it
Yeah.
seems, there's some areas over index on one more versus the other.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, it's I what we see at least is still like return on ad dollars is still pretty strong on Amazon versus ultimately with Shopify you're going to Google or Meta or TikTok or something to for advertising, and certainly some of those marketplaces are pretty developed in terms of and competitive in terms of how to deploy that capital. on Amazon, you still see good return on investment, and that's generally what we see is we tend to see people that kind of like either all in on Amazon, I guess, or like just don't go on the platform at all. Like I think there's this idea that with Shopify, of course, you can you don't necessarily pay the sales commission you have to Amazon, and there's a bunch of other benefits, right? But then you have to drive the traffic to your site yourself, which is can be challenging.
Yeah, the closed ecosystem that Amazon offers, pays off in so many ways, whether it's
Yeah,
being able to have that for the advertising side, but also just the trust that the customer has when they're already on the marketplace, especially if you have the reviews, if you have, the Amazon Prime badge,
yeah,
there's a sort of a framework there that people are already comfortable with using and shopping from. Whereas with
yeah,
Shopify, you're landing on a random website that you may have never heard of before. And there's, higher barrier to purchase for that person that you've gotten to your site versus if they're already on Amazon, especially depending
yeah,
on, the advertising, keywords that you're bidding on. If somebody is at that sort of last step and the intent is already really high versus you're catching them on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok
sure.
and more of a discovery phase, um, it makes sense why the conversion rates and the advertising would be more effective on Amazon.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing quite interesting people testing it out, at least driving traffic from Amazon. I mean, from Shopify back to their store on Amazon, just because of the conversion rate, increasing conversion rate they're seeing because, people are just used to buying on Amazon and they know they're going to get it super quick with Prime and so forth. And Amazon loves external traffic, like juicing those listings, right, from things like Shopify. But then the downside is you obviously pay the commission to Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. You don't necessarily get the customer details. So it's a tricky one, but I think worth testing out those different paths to conversion and see what ultimately makes sense.
Go, Going into 2025, what are some of the things that you're most excited about? And then what are some of the things that you're, concerned about or see as, potential road bumps?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're most excited about is we're pretty technologically driven, right? And we see AI as fundamentally pretty transformational, right? And I think what that means for sellers and brands is that we can, you know, provide even better return on investment by further developing this technology ourselves and incorporating some of the new technologies in. So that's often the number one concern for sellers is like, how do I maximize my ad spend? And the other area is around um, which we're trying. We think there's an opportunity, and we think this is where sellers would benefit from a system where rather than you're interacting with a typical kind of account manager, you're actually interacting with an AI that is highly informed about your account. You can have conversations with it around if you want to, know specifics on certain data or trends. You can ask it questions. You can instruct it to do things. So this is kind of like we see this kind of like personal assistant, account manager being digitized and being highly performant and ultimately yielding, better results for the sellers as well as keeping them more informed. So this is an area which we're super excited for. This is what we're building towards. I think, this is kind of agencies 2.0 in many ways. And I think in general, Amazon is just always churning out also like new tooling and new cool things and new ad placements and all those types of things, which I think are going to benefit sellers, and we hope to be able to like offer those products to sellers too. So this is kind of like what we're building towards and what we're excited about in 2025. In terms of the challenges, I think I mean, obviously, we're always just fighting this constant increase in CPCs, right? I think it's getting more competitive, so that's just something that's part of being in this business. Um, I would say like diversification is still quite important, right? And um, I think as you never want to be too reliant on a single platform, both from like a seller point of view and also a solutions point of view. So this is where I think it's always wise to make sure you have some diversification of your sales channels. And yeah, I would say those are the kind of main considerations. Um, I mean, overall, if you look at the kind of in Amazon in particular, if you just look at their like quarterly earnings and profits and growth, um, they're still on a very positive like year-on-year trajectory of like 20% growth month on month, quarter on quarter, right, or year-on-year quarters. So that just kind of means that there's a wave that everyone can benefit from, I think, as this more people adopt the platform, um, and ultimately, more sales are going through it, and there's great opportunity. So that's very positive, but also, you need to be mindful that it's like turning into market dominance, I guess, and therefore it's a bit risky.
Yeah, definitely. I got one last question for you, a little bit less on the actual like Amazon platform itself, but more on the business side of things. How do you think about balancing service versus software and the
Mm,
offering that you're giving your clients? Um,
sure. So I think our thinking on this has changed slightly in the last year or two. I would say initially we were like 95% software. And I think this is very good from our business point of view in terms of like, generally speaking, software businesses have, lower fixed costs and better margins, and the economics of them make a lot of sense. And and we certainly have customers that love that model, I guess, the kind of self-service model. But what we have seen is that there is a decent chunk of people that want, closer to a white glove service, right? And they want to interact with a human, like, and whether that's like super robust conversation or whether that's just knowing that, they're being taken care of. And so we've naturally kind of expanded our offering to be able to cater towards both types of audience. It's still biased towards software, but I think there's agencies kind of exist for a reason, and they're very much like a people's business. Just as they're less results orientated, it seems, as I would say, and more kind of like relationship building and maintaining type of business. So yeah, we of course want to cater for the different requirements. But I guess our view still on it is that now with AI kind of on the increase and its ability to act and speak and behave like a human, means that we might be able to move back into the software direction, but kind of mimic that human behavior, I guess, right? And this is where we're trying to produce a cutting edge product in terms of an AI agency, if you like.
Got it. No, that makes sense. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your insights. But before we hop here, can you let everyone know where they can find you online and connect with you if they want to learn more?
Cool. Yeah. So probably LinkedIn is probably the best place. So just hit me up, Julian Timings on LinkedIn, and then check out obviously Autron.ai. Start a chat on there, and if you ask to speak to me, I'll jump on there, and more than happy to jump on a call with people and answer their questions and guide them through what we do and how we can be helpful. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for coming on. For everybody listening, as always, this is Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at brandonamoroso.com and scalus.ai. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.